Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LJL OU podcast, episode 11 of season number 2. MaskedSwan here, joined by the unequaled man in the middle, Initia1ise. Hello, Initia1ise.
Hello. Good to be here.
Hello, and the enchanting Nymaera. Welcome, sir. You landed a charm, I think.
Wow, I'm like, wow, I've never played enchanters in my life. Get that Jana out. I say that. I used to play a load of Jana back when I was struggling to get to Diamond. That wasn't actually what got me to Diamond, apparently, but you know, whatever. Maybe I'll pick up that class at some point.
Okay,
Moving
so
on.
we got an enchanter kind of person. No. It's all about the engaged support. So that's currently what the meta is. Samuel Initialize Hapgood, Alex Nymaera Hapgood, gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. What is this podcast, Nymaera?
What is this podcast? It is it's at the bottom of the screen. We've said it already. The LJL Officially Unofficial OU podcast, where it's us three talking about Japanese League of Legends. That, of course, includes the Premier League in Japan for that, which is the LJL. So that means that we do often spend a lot of time about that. It's currently in playoffs. That's what we're going to be talking about today.
And, I mean, if we're doing something around the official league, are we associated with Ride Japan or any of their partners or anything, Initialize?
Sadly, not as of the moment. We are on our own. I nearly made an April Fool's joke. It's April 1st, and I couldn't come up with one.
Coming out today.
It's actually funny. So, I know. So, we have to deal with this. That's what you get, guys. Me referencing it rather than actually having a joke for you. So, yeah.
Yes, we are affiliated with. We actually couldn't joke about being affiliated with Riot.
Yeah,
we're actually not.
And I've made that joke before, which I've not done since. So.
These are our own views and opinions as well, though, so he could have joked about it because I would have slammed him down afterwards, going, "It doesn't matter what you say." I've been watching a lot of old WWE stuff. Can you tell? I had the Rock. It doesn't matter what you. Anyway, you can check out each of our social media pages down below each of our faces, as well as the LJL OU. Initialize is just dying over there, so I'm gonna keep going with the audio podcast version of this podcast. It's available on all audio streaming platforms. Welcome back, sir. And, of course, if you want to ask us any questions, you can hit us up through our individual Twitter DMs, which are normally always open. Or if you're ever in doubt, you can join our Discord server. Link in the description or the show notes if you're watching it on audio. And you can find the link there, gentlemen. This week, as Nymaera has already hinted towards, we are going to be talking about Destination Focus Me facing off against Rascal Jester in their series. We will then be talking about Sengoku Gaming facing off against V3 Esports this week. It's actually in a few days. It'll be on Sunday at 9 a.m. for any of our listeners out there. We will be streaming this live, and we will be finally having the return of Nymaera in the casting booth after multiple weeks of this guy just disappearing, having more things to do. He's a busy man.
I have been so busy. I've been casting so much, doing so much new work. It'll be good to be back, though. Some really good series to come.
And obviously, Initialize is always here because you're our trooper, mate.
Apparently so. Just the way. I'm sorry for the choking earlier. I managed to inhale my coffee when you were talking about WWE references. I was like, this is a bad mistake.
I've heard inhaling.
Can you tell what The Rock is drinking? Apparently coffee.
I mean, we did wake him up from his slumber, so...
I finished work at 4 a.m, so I was just like... I managed to sleep through 2 alarms for like an hour. It wasn't good.
Gets woken up from a phone call, so it's okay. It's okay. We will then be ending off this podcast with your question, ladies and gentlemen. And I mean, when it comes to questions, if, as I've already mentioned, you can ask them in our podcast Discord. I do ping out to our Discord asking for those questions. And if you're ever unsure, you can always hit the DMs of the LJL OU account. And if you're designated and saying, hey, this is for the podcast, we will cover it. Gentlemen, we are still on our road to finals, and I think it would be ridiculous for us not to say the results at the very beginning of this one because it's going to be contextualizing a lot of the conversation. Destination Focus Me won. Now, sadly, you, Nymaera, and you, Initialize, went for the correct prediction. You did. I'm going to be honest here. You guessed correctly. The factor is, I guessed correctly that DFM would punt one game, and I got that correct as well. Detonation focused me 1-3-1, and they look like the strongest team in the LJL. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're going to be talking about here is we're going to be going over the matches, but we're also going to be kind of talking about a few key things that we've identified from this series, and go through that, and then maybe anything else that comes to our mind around this. Gentlemen, I mean, what's your thoughts just holistically around this series? I'm going to go to Nymaera first, because you watched these, you didn't cast these.
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't kind of like in the zone with you guys when you were casting with that. I mean, I tuned in from game 3 and 4. I saw bits of game 2. I didn't end up placing it. Of course, I've gone and recapped a little bit over that. It seems to be the continuing narrative of DFM kind of giving themselves losses, if anything. I'm actually not sure we've seen DFM necessarily been like super hard slapped from an even draft. It feels like even when they have losing drafts, they end up making it work. It's only when they have like a catastrophe in draft phase where you're just like, they end up losing. The fact that Rascal Jester is one of those teams that can punish them is something. But in this series, I think DFM again kind of show that everything's kind of usual from that. We haven't normally during a break between playoffs, we look at the prep, we look at how teams have moved about in various trajectories. Seems like they're at the same level at the end of the split that I expect them to be, though.
Damn, what's your thoughts? Because you were there with me at the end of it, and it was pretty hype for us, really, at the end. It was a great series to cast.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the best two teams in the LJL duking it out, and DFM looking like the better team right now. That said, we called out both AD carries as star players for their teams potentially in this matchup because they were going to be so important. And they were. We had 4 games of Ezreal back-to-back with the first 3 games of Ezreal. Ezreal absolutely running over the game for one reason and another. Finally, the last game, he gets punished.
Quick caveat. I'm pretty sure Sol, after this series, ended up being the highest DPM player in a major region in the world.
He did,
not major,
yeah.
right? In a top-level region, right? So not ERL. Yeah. So that's like, yeah. But so Sol, out of every player in the world...
Get rid of those academy kids, and then we get to be counted.
Highest DPM of anyone in the world.
Yeah, it was on the Mobalytics page. Oh, go for it, Sam.
At least after that series, no, he's not.
Oh, right. Damn.
It was before this. Going off Game of Legend. I mean, I don't know whether that changed after Game 4. Possibly might ruin his stats. Because off of Game of Legends, he's at 494 DPM in that series.
So what we got shared in our Discord is just by a long-time member of our community of Penguaru. Just shared the Lolly Sports stat of at the moment when he posted this yesterday. He had first place Soul DNG. This is
the entirety of 2021 spring, by the way. So,
right.
So
this
the average.
Right.
So Soul for the entirety of 2021 spring so far
has been deleted.
That is not true. It is currently still up on this Esports thing, and he has a damage per minute of 690. Over 18 games with 35%. 35% damage percent.
They blocked me? What the fuck?
How rude.
I can't access it no matter what I do. Holy.
That's kind of cool. So yeah, no, like I knew his regular season stats were ridiculous, like actually insane. We'd been tracking that for months and months. And in this series, it kind of turned up, right? Utapon got the edge in this series. I think particularly Game 3, Utapon's Ezreal in Game 3 was just silly, but I'm sure we'll get into the games themselves relatively even. But both these AD carries had a hell of a series to talk about.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, overall, though, this series just kind of ended up being the side of which Ezreal seemed to fall on, whichever the side that Hecarim fell on as well was very important. And I mean, I also need to explain the title of this episode of the podcast. 28 minutes. The reason there's 28 minutes only is because every game in this series was 28 minutes. We believe, and I've done a bit of Google searching. I need to double check this. I think this is the first time we've had back-to-back games in a competitive level game of this caliber where both Game 1 and Game 2 have the exact same time to the second. Like, minute definitely has happened all the time. To the second, back-to-back in the Game 1 to Game 2, I've never heard of it before.
Because Wonder tweeted out a timestamp and then beat a team in that time. I'm trying to remember if that happened 2 times.
Back-to-back games?
I'm not sure if it was in back-to-back games. Either way,
Yeah.
huge coincidence. If it is a world first, that's awesome.
I think.
And,
mean,
looking at the goal graphs as well, like they're literally almost mirrors of each other. Like it's like, and the first one it goes like this, and the second one it goes like this, and it's like that's exactly the same as have some slight like minute differences. It's a little bit silly actually.
Yeah, so let's actually start covering these games from game number 1. Okay, so this is the 28 minutes and 4 seconds one, the first of the 28 4
This is on the
seconds.
screen for you.
We have Ebby playing Renekton, we got Hecarim, Zoe, Ezreal, and Gragas. Obviously, we've already covered this Ezreal. But Ari actually played a very kind of interesting game in this one. Was very unimpactful for the first 10-15 minutes of this game, but then really started to amp up. Hit maybe one of those 2 item breakpoints. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, so I'm not going to decisively say that. But was definitely landing a lot more of those sleepy bubbles and causing huge issues for the side of Rascal Jester, wasn't he, initially?
Yeah, he was. It was a relatively calm early game until there was a sort of a managed to get a kill in bot lane, did Kazu, and used one with a bit of assistance from Steel.
Yeah.
He also had a very good game, honestly, on the Hecarim. And then the bubbles started landing. You hit this mid game where you've got vision control and you've got this beefy front line that you don't want to face check, and you're doing it into double poke with an Ezreal and a Zoe that managed to get themselves fed. Arya gets to go Medjai's early on in the game, and yes, DFM get themselves a bit of a gold lead, and then it's kind of a bit of a stall, really, where Rascal just don't go for fights. They just refuse to get involved for a long time until eventually DFM find what they're looking for around Baron, and it's all game over.
I mean, what are your thoughts
playing
around
Syndra.
this one? Oh, okay.
Stop playing Syndra. It's not a good pick right now.
But it works in the next series. It works literally in this series in the next game.
But it's not a good pick. If just like Syndra has like one good game plan, which is over punishing diving champions, but the diving champions in meta right now are so good at it, you actually get minimal value out of it. You get more value out of nuking someone in the backline. Syndra doesn't have the consistent DPS to deal with most of the champions, which are difficult in team fights right now. And the one thing that you got going for you in this game is that it's an okay matchup versus the Zoe. It's still a skill matchup, and given that and this, I guess this is another thing too. Actually, I'm actually not sure if Recap started with the corrupting pot on the Syndra. It doesn't look like he did, because he's got the Doran's ring in inventory. He might have sold it off. I'm not sure.
No, yeah, he started Doran's. Yeah.
So one of the reasons you can go for Corrupting Potion into super early trading using all of your mana, which is of course one of the things which has gated Syndra recently, has been that Syndra is like sat there and was like, oh, I've got so much more mana to cut like on my Q cast at rank 1 now. It's like an extra 50% cost for so little damage too. You often go Corrupting Pot, go back at level 3, level 4 on the first cannon wave, and then you go back with a tier, which you go for the Seraphs anyway, and you come back and you've already refilled your Corrupting Pot. You don't if you don't do that, it feels like you're missing
Corrupting Pot. He only he brought a refill potion and never actually upgraded it as well, which is even worse, right?
Yeah, so particularly because if you go Inspiration, you go Time Warp Tonic as well if you want. So you have so Orianna Syndra can use this little tech and just be like, push in early, get prio, get an early tier on the wave that you want to get it, and it also means that you get to kind of get coasted through those first couple of levels where Syndra has struggled. But even with that, Syndra's not great. She's okay, but that's like a push from me.
Yeah.
The thing is, this game was relatively close for the full 24-ish minutes of this game, and then one big fight happened. The difference was DFM were already ahead by 1k, but the other thing was they just were stacking dragons. They were going for dragons. They were like, hey, you have to come in, play into us. It was far better for them because they had a composition that was very happy to either play engage or play disengage, regardless of how they had to do it. They played around the dragon. They were able to get the ace. They get the Baron, and then that was it.
Yeah.
That was actually it.
Plus, I think the other thing is like, okay, well, we're actually like, yes, the gold was pretty close for a long time. It was like 1.5 to 2k gold
Something
for a
like
large
that,
monitor. But like the gold was largely, honestly, on the Ezreal and on the Zoe, whereas it's a lot more evenly spread on Rascal Jesters, and that meant actually when you've got it concentrated on the 2 people that matter, and actually Steel is seeding a fair amount of his jungle to give Arya and Utapon more farm, and actually he's using his time to basically just throw down vision in the enemy jungle for your double poke plus frontline composition to just make life a living hell for everybody who tries to face check. Then
And you have disengage with Gragas.
Right, yeah, and also like there was just a point where Ebby just gets to did Ebby things a little bit as well. Like Kanatu on the weak side, played weak side relatively well. He's trying to play weak side relatively well, but when you're seeding vision, how much he's giving up on weak side is a bit frustrating as well for sometimes.
Would agree.
I suppose the next thing I'd talk, because remember this, so I just looked at the draft again, like Kanatu was the last pick here on the Volibear.
He was,
Volibear against 2 auto-attacking, physical damage, top jungle, should crush that matchup. You should absolutely demolish the Renekton. Volibear has been a Renekton answer in a similar fighter matchup for quite a long time now. For Kanatu to be kind of put into the dumpster a bit by Ebby, I suppose, in terms of those particularly in the side lane, that feels like it shouldn't happen.
So I remember the early game, he definitely got bullied a little bit by the side. They weren't able to actually get any kills on him, but it kept pushing him out. He was farming under turret. He had to back and then teleport back in. He was put in a lot of difficult spots, and Hachimecha wasn't able to kind of reply.
So exactly. It wasn't necessarily the laning mechanics, I think, which was the problem for Kanatu. It was basically once the lane got a little bit later, once there was an item or so onto Ebby, which makes things a bit more difficult because your Strybreaker plus executioners and things. It's a little harder to win purely off items. And it's side lane management where you're running with lower vision. So at which point Kanatu just can't be in the side lane the way he wants to be, and he ends up dropping more farm. Not necessarily because he's playing the matchup badly, but because actually he doesn't have the vision to get everything he wants.
Exactly. That kind of shows me actually like Detonation focused me just like enable Ebby better as well. Because I mean the whole thing about Volibear as champion in this matchup is that Renekton is solely physical damage besides from like a tiny bit from his ultimate, the Dominus, right? Which means that when you've got toe caps and you've got Bramble Vest, effectively Renekton just loses every trade versus you. And Volibear on the flip side of that has mixed damage because Sky Splitter amongst other things is heavily magic damage. You can start Doran's Ring for extra poke too.
AP.
Exactly, you can. There are actually full AP builds. Apparently, there's a really fun Nash's build out there, which you may want to try. Don't try it in your solo queue.
No.
Either way,
just get W up as fast as you can.
If you want to play Nash's Tooth, play Xin Zhao. If you want to play a Nash's Tooth build, play Xin Zhao. Play a completely different champion.
I've not played LoL in forever, purely because my R key on my keyboard is only working 1/3 of the time, and therefore playing League of Legends at the minute would be a mistake.
Why don't you just
that and my E double casts. So like I was trying to play Vladimir recently on ARAM, and I can't play Vladimir because my E just won't hold.
Just rebind it to ASDF.
Anyway, I mean
that's possibly not a bad idea.
So just from looking at the end game stats, without even seeing the game, I look at some of these matchups and I'm like, that's a bit odd that Leeds were there at that level, right? So yeah, okay. I mean, Ebby does incredible things, but Kanatu has often been that confidence player to take it to Ebby. But in this matchup, it looks like DFM just weaponized Ebby better on the Renekton.
Yeah. Again, it's not necessarily the lane. The lane was relatively even. It was basic. It's the post lane point where actually, the vision control goes, and you're losing vision control versus Renekton, versus Hecarim, versus Gragas, and then behind them is a fed Zoe and Ezreal who can follow up from a mile away. Like, it does get difficult.
And the other big part is any time that Hachimecha tried to make a play in topside, Ebby was able to get away. Like, it was the really disappointing thing of like when they tried to punish, Ebby was just too big brained and stopped them. Game 1 went to DFM, gentlemen. And I think honestly, it's gonna the big part of where I want to talk about this series is actually game number 2, which looks very similar to game number 1. It's just Rascal Jester's winning. Why am I so interested in talking about this one, gentlemen? Well, because it's, as we've mentioned once or twice before about DFM, and it's not what as Nymaera was talking about. DFM has kind of always lost to themselves to some point. To some level, there has always been kind of an admission of fault from the side of DFM that you can kind of identify at least at one point or another. This game was, if you look at just the raw match history, you don't watch the game, you'd be like, well, it's just 18-4, 28 minutes and 4 seconds. Like, you look at the gold graph and it's like, well, Rascal Jesters were always ahead. That's only telling a tiny bit of this story because you don't see what's happening on the map. You also didn't look at the pick and ban phase, and I'm very disappointed with you.
Yeah.
Syndra came in.
Yes, Syndra comes in again.
Sorry, Alex.
But the big deal for this one is Rascal Jester's got themselves a hold of the Hecarim and the Ezreal themselves.
Yeah.
They also then get the Gragas into the Rel matchup in bot side, which turns out to be quite important. Kazu goes 0-6-1 and Rel in this game, which says a lot about how some of those early engages went, and we'll go on to that a little later. And then also like
The big one is obviously Camille in the top lane, right? Well,
Yeah.
also they got Hecarim, who is still, ladies and gentlemen, 100% presence, 100%
Yeah.
win.
Oh god.
Interesting. We'll talk about that one probably a little bit later for the V3 series, because I think that sets up far more for how Crash played this champion and kind of set the stage for playoffs Hecarim. But it is, as we were talking before we actually came on here, Initialize, with Nymaera as well, Camille.
Yeah.
This was a big pick for them, and they picked it up and they got the win, right? Like, this was Kanadu actually showing this confidence against Ebby that we had already talked about.
He gets a solo kill. I mean, like, it's a clever solo kill, don't get me wrong, where both champions are racing for level 6, and Kinaltu hits it 1 minion before Ebby does, and as a result, he gets the Hextech ultimatum, and Ebby's stuck level 5 and loses the trade.
That's so much Ebby has done time and time again, though, on the flip side.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's what Ebby likes to do, right? He pushes for those kind of solo kill moments. The problem is pushing for them puts you close to the line, and Kinaltu gets the edge of it here and gets that solo kill. So he gets that one there. This is just after in the bot lane. Got to point out as well, DFM went for that double poke plus frontline engage option again, but instead of the Ezreal, they went for the poke Varus. And, you know, that's all well and good as long as your front line doesn't start inting in the early game. And on the other side, you're not into a Camille and a Hecarim who can get onto a Varus who has no way to escape.
But Nymaera, but Initialize, if we take it over to Nymaera for this one, they put themselves in this position with the Varus. They red side pick 5 the Varus. They also allowed Rascal Jester, for the greater good of whether it's good or bad, Nymaera. They picked Syndra. They picked Camille.
I mean, so basically, I mean, I don't have the draft order on things, but it's important to note that basically going into the second part of the draft, you've got your second bands coming through. DFM had themselves the blind pick Gnar. Rascal Jester had themselves their bot lane already. They didn't need to worry about that. So Rascal Jester, much like DFM in game 1, had left their solo picks for picks 4 and 5 on blue side for themselves. So DFM start banning out lanes which might end up punishing the eventual Zoe that comes in for them, which again, then Rascal Jester see that's on the table, and then they can counterpick both solo lanes. One of the reasons that you don't ban away stuff like the Camille in this draft is because there are way too many Gnar counters. You can't ban out all of Gnar's counters. What you can try and do is ban away counters to Gnar which actually fit with the composition that you're playing against. You already see the Ezreal and the Gragas and the Hecarim, and you think, okay, they've got quite a lot of mobility, quite a lot of follow-up. Maybe the Camille's worth a ban. They ban away the Orianna and the Zillion instead. I mean, both of them still high-value champions, but the fact that they blind pick Gnar and they punish is because you can still punish him with Jace, with Aurelia if you play that as well. There are a couple of other picks up there too. Heck, the Urgot came out from V3 versus the Hawks in that 5-game series. It didn't work out, but I still think it's a Gnar counter. But DFM kind of putting so much priority on the Gnar, and this is what happened the last time they lost against his Rascal Jesters too. That was a problem for me. And then the last pick Varus, I actually don't think it's a bad pick. In terms of what you've actually got left for you. Like, you've just kind of got to swallow it at that point and be like, all right, it's a bit of disengage, chuck out the ult, maybe you can poke someone out. They're quite squishy, I suppose.
Mixed poke, Varus and Zoe, double poke,
exactly.
Good front line, like, there's a world.
But, I also think there's problems with the builds and the itemization. So there's a Stride Breaker coming in from Olaf, which is the highest damage Olaf build you're going to get at this current patch, because Stride Breaker allows you to really combo people down. But it's also the least survivable Olaf build you can get towards, because you can go stuff like the Gore Drinker still. I think actually it might have been worth maybe going for that in this game. Heck, I mean, I've heard some whispers of Chem Tank Olaf being a thing, and let's be honest, Olaf doesn't really care about his itemization. Regardless, right, I still think, I think that's a minor thing. Yutapon goes for Halo Blades. This is the thing which Yutori Miyashi did last year in spring when he picked up the Varus for Sengoku in the spring playoffs, and that was huge for them when they beat DFM in that 5-game series in the upper bracket in the Juggernaut match. In this game though, this Varus, you look about Syndra, who's going to be out of range of you, Hecarim, who is never going to let you stand in free fire because he's going to be ulting on top of you, so you're never actually going to get a chance to auto-attack. Gragas, who can slow you and then jump out of range, so you're going to get one auto attack most, and Camille, who, well, let's be honest, if you're auto attacking the Camille,
Gonna jump at you.
very wrong. This feels like this Hail Blades doesn't really work in the laning phase because you're outranged, and it feels like you're not going to get too much efficacy out of it in team fights. So I feel like it should have been a Comet game. If not, I mean, I don't think it's a. I think Xayah
maybe.
you do miss out on the part.
Camille.
I think that the Varus ultimate gives you some utility to play around in this game, because Varus ultimate into Zoe, into Varus Q and stuff like that is something you can work with. Again, I don't dislike the Varus. I dislike the way that DFM played around it, because there are very specific ways you want to play with a poke comp. You don't have yourself any regens, so you don't end up like, because obviously Syndra and Ezreal also poke you out too. You don't have yourself a strong frontline, because Gnar, Olaf, and even Rel are conditional frontline. They're not even full tanks. And I think that DFM didn't play according to what their poke composition really wanted in this game.
And then even in game, like we saw, as I said, that solo kill topside, which, you know, is partly because you're playing to the wire, partly because, you know, and that's just sometimes the way it happens when you do roll the dice, and Kanatu came to play, right? Like, credit to him, came to play, ran the Camille and got that solo kill off that, like, that last minion auto to get the level 6 to get in. Bot side, though, Kazu, you know, going in real deep early on, dies, gives this Ezreal an early advantage in lane, at which point, you know, Rel then basically instant every time she tries to go in. She ends up 0-6 and 1.
You don't all in with that lane.
And then basically, it's not even like you're playing from an even map state where you can try and play around with vision control to get your poke rolling. And, you know, DFM largely showed they were better at setting up vision throughout this series. They didn't get the chance because they were kind of far behind in both sides of the map. And then on top of that, you've also got Sol's Ezreal. And, like, I'm aware that obviously we've been kind of questioning a little bit DFM's draft here, and rightly so. It was some awkward moments, even if, like, okay, we see some of the idea, it just wasn't the best into this draft, and some of the front line to go along with this double poke maybe wasn't fantastic either. But on top of that, Sol had a sick game. Like, holy, this guy on Ezreal. I have not seen a game on Ezreal in quite some time where a man manages to slip out of every single CC aimed at him in team fight. Like, it was nuts. There was once in mid lane where they tried to engage on him in a 3v2, where he literally picks, frame perfect, avoids Varus ult, and then continues to turn around the team fight and gets 3 kills basically back after the other one. There's another one around sort of Baron where Gnar teleports in to try and get onto him, hops over the wall, he gets one Gnar out of the wall, so he frame perfect Captain Jack QSS's, then Arcane shifts out of the wallop follow-up from Gnar and kites out the rest of the team fight. Like, there's another one later on.
And that was perfect situation where DFM were at last moment. They had to get this kill. They had to actually win this fight or the game was over. And that's the fact that how good Sol was playing never even allowed DFM to have that kind of catch-up opportunity that they normally get in most games against everybody else. Didn't get it here because Sol was like, ha, fuck you. You're not playing like that against me.
And I have to say, this is the kind of game, for me, it's a little bit of a tangent. This is the game which sets apart Sol from players like Zenit and Honey, right? Because Zenit and Honey, well, okay, more Zenit. Honey's actually, I think, kind of somewhere in between the two, I suppose. But Zenit, like, can get himself gold leads and has a good laning phase, same as Sol. Sol's team fighting and his ability to outplay dangerous situations has been a step above pretty much everyone else but Utapon, actually. So both these 280 carries really going at it in this series.
Really good. Yeah, I'll also add on that, you know, it does help that the rest of, say, Sol and Utapon's teammates are also real good, and they're communicating more information, and you give them more vision control. So, you know, maybe if Zenit was in place of Sol, you might see some better stuff out of Zenit. You know, has shown good stuff in lane and the likes of it, but even so, this is partly why you're saying, well, why did, you know, this Korean coach has come over and asked for a Korean bot lane? Why did he pick up Sol and Secret? Well, when you're pulling off games like this,
world high DPM for 2021 spring so far.
Right,
bot
like,
lane.
it just exactly. You give him the tools to carry, and he can certainly do so. And you know, there's a reason why Korean Ezreals are given so much hype at certain points. You know, like look back a couple years, that trinity of deft, pray, and bang. It's changed a little now, sadly, for some of those old school fans. But you know, Sol puts his name in the hat in the LJL and absolutely crushed it in this game until game 3, where Utapon returns the favor.
Yeah, before we go on to it, I just want to talk about obviously some of those key moments that DFM lost. I mean, obviously the big defining one was that teleportation in where Ebby tried to do this really deep TP. The issue is, he did it far too late into that team fight. He was teleporting in after Kanatu was already TPing into the play. DFM just looked very kind of slow on the response in game number 2. They were playing as if they had an extra second or two to react to a play or to make a play or something. And Rascal Jester identified, or even just kind of were just doing their thing and just like, we can get a pick here, we can just kill them here, and did multiple times. I mean, this was DFM's own fault to getting in this spot. There's no reason that Arya has to be playing Zoe. That's a fact. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, he can play
what are they
anything and
locked in at
probably
that point? What are
win,
they locked in?
but I
Like,
don't know if that's really the strongest pick that he could be playing there.
What I will say is, like, again, Zoe Varus is a great poke combo, assuming you're even or ahead.
Azir's available. Why is Azir not
Well,
picked?
Well,
no, there's
well,
there's
basically-
multiple
basically, yeah.
reasons. Twisted Fate wasn't banned, from what I remember.
No,
It was.
it was,
Second
it
round
was,
it was.
it
Second
was,
round it was.
yeah.
By that
So,
point,
like,
it was.
I'm assuming it's because they wanted this double poke again, right? They ran it in the first game with Ezreal and Zoe. They wanted to run it again second. And, like, that's great if you can keep your front line alive and you can play with vision, right? Like, you can just be so obnoxious, no one can ever walk up to you because you just control a zone. Like, it makes a load of... that makes sense, assuming you can stay even to ahead. That didn't happen this game. And then you see the absolute other side of the coin where it's like, okay, we're trying to play into the dark, and it's awful.
It's just
not
that it's
good,
11.5
and this is where it would
on
be
this
better.
patch. Because what we've seen is 11.67 as well, slowly taking power out of some of the stronger diving champions too. And Azir, yes, was nerfed a bit in the laning phase, and yeah, that's relevant. I do think he's pretty OP on this patch still, and Zoe's not. I mean, this is kind of Arya just saying, "I'll just win the counter matchup. I'll win the skill matchup, right?"
Pretty much, yeah.
Which is fair enough.
Which is fair enough, and again, I don't think the recap Arya matchup was really key to this game. Like it's a factor,
No.
I suppose, but I don't think it's key to it. I think DFM were not patient enough to play a poke composition in this game for most of it, and of course the laning phase advantages stopping them from having a good foothold. It kind of exemplifies the issue because a poke comp, particularly Zoe, exemplifies this too. If you start losing towers early, if you start losing priority early, you don't really get to see how the comp works.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Game 3, as you were saying though, goes completely differently though. And this was DFM way back in the driver's seat. As you can see, we've got a Kiana. So
This game got spicy, man.
that's a thing. We've got Ezreal, Utapon on Ezreal going 13-0-7. We had a very long flex pick Gragas during the pick and ban phase, and then it was decided at the very end they were actually like, no, we're going to give Kazu Alistair, we're going to give Kiana here for Arya, and then we're going to throw Gragas up into the top lane, which caused some issues. It felt like there were clear issues. Recap definitely being unfamiliar with the Kiana matchup was painfully obvious to see just with some of how the interaction and trades were going in the laning phase. I remember cutting you off, Sam, sometimes going, what is going on? And you're just like, I electrocute. And I'm just like, yes, electrocute.
Blade of Ixtal plus electrocute puts you down very low.
And the other thing is like, so Kiana right now, well, this also goes for Jace and it also goes for Pantheon, although Jace is like still really on the Eclipse hype train, so whatever really. But you can use Prowler's Claw. Well, if you read the item description, you'll say dash to an enemy target. It doesn't say enemy champion. You can actually dash to monsters and minions. So what you can do on something like Kiana is you can use it as a minion taxi. So you can Prowler's Claw W forward if you're out of range, or you can Prowler's Claw into an EQ WQ, which is like a double Q combo. But most of the time, you're out of range for that double Q combo. You don't really get to do that. Well, you don't really get to avoid that though from the other side of things. If you just end up just like smashing through the wave with the Prowler's Claw, yeah, you miss some of the damage. And also that's the other thing, right? It gives you flat lethality. That's huge for Kiana, and who of course Arya has a very. I mean, AD Assassins have some really good builds right now. If ever they get to the point where they have a play pattern which works with the other champions in meta, like they expect to see them because lethality. I mean, lethality Sivir is the thing. For God's sake, like the items are there, but particularly for Kiana and for someone as talented as Arya, having that extra playmaking potential with the Prowler's Claw to have obscene gap closing is really fun to see on the pro stage.
Yeah. Like, as an aside, because I don't know whether we mentioned it quite yet, you know, this was also into an Urgot top from Kinati, first time in this series. It was into a Lissandra mid from Recap, first time in this series. Hatcher, Metcha, and Secret ran the Thresh Skarner combo, and then Sol picked up Jinx as well. So, like, it's a fun draft from Rascal Jesters. It just all goes wrong quite quickly, and the Kiana as well, I suppose at this point, probably worth pointing this out because I did a little bit of research for this one. Arya basically went for this 1800 LP Kiana one-trick Bayfangs build, the guy who did that ridiculous outplay on Faker on the Kiana. Yeah, it was on Reddit, it was on a load of social media.
I saw it live actually. Faker went to a stream. I was like, wait, what the hell? You can do that?
At which point Faker the next game went, guess I ought to pick up Kiana and then get some ridiculous plays myself. And as a result, Kiana's kind of hitting a little bit of notice right now. Partly because of this Prowler's Claw build, but basically what you do is you go Prowlers into Serpent Fang and Cerebral's Grudge, which gives you a lot of lethality, a lot of armor pen, and a lot of shield break. So what it basically means is you've got a lot of that. You basically you can't defend yourself very easily as a squishy to medium tank. And Kiana's got enough CC and damage to be able to really punish people with that point.
In this game,
if you get ahead, you can go Manamune third as well. So basically, you get your Dirk and you get Tier after that.
So also, I mean, the big thing about the shield break in this game is, of course, it's a response to can the AD carry build shield blow. That's one thing, right? Probably not going to go with that as a jinx. Probably not. What it is important with is that a lot of Threshers basically have a choice between, and you'll see it whether they have Guardian or Aftershock, right? If you go Guardian, you're actually W max on Thresh. I know it's the thing that was nerfed last season for him. If you W max and have Guardian, you have something like an extra 500-600 shield you can chuck on your AD carry, particularly when you go Aegis as well. You get decent shields, and when you're diving into a team fight, having that Serpent's Fang and then the Cerebral's Grudge for the, all of the extra armor pen, that obviously works into it, but having the shield break, which is on the current iteration of Serpent's Fang, it's not the extra damage to shielded targets, it just halves the shield on them flat out, and then any shields they receive after are halved. It allows you actually to pick your moment within a team fight and say, screw it, doesn't matter if they have shields at this point, you're still in danger.
Yeah. And again, this is a Thresh that went Locket Rush, right? To try and help out against some of the poke stuff. So you've got.
Oh, sorry, not Aegis. Yeah, Locket. Sorry. Yeah, I'm used to them. Yeah. I'm used to them being the same things built out of Aegis. So, you know what I mean? Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's Lantern plus that, plus then you're also into a Skarner and an Urgot. Urgot's bruisery, but he takes a while before he gets truly tanky because his first two items are bruiser items, right? And he's HP stacking. Plus, a lot of his tankiness effectively comes from sustain for his lifesteal, his HP, and then on top of that, it's disdain shield. Which doesn't happen versus a Kiana, basically, at this point.
Now,
so
this game,
it does become a problem later on.
And in this game, Kinatu did actually become the only hope and prayer for the side of the Rascal Jesters in this game. Countless times Hachimechi was like, well, everywhere else is on fire. Literally, it's all on fire. So you can't go near anybody, or Kazu will just headbutt you, or Ari will come out of somewhere, or Steel will come out of somewhere. It's like, okay, you're just not safe. Keanu, we're gonna just keep killing Ebby. You get a bunch of turrets in bot lane, and credit where it's due, Kinatu actually got himself into a spot that was, I was calling Keanu, I just realized.
Wake up, Samurai, we've got a league to burn.
I'm like, wait a moment.
That's not in the game. I'm really upset. That phrase is not in the Cyberpunk.
Oh, apparently it's going to be when all the updates come out.
Good.
Like, but it's,
okay.
No,
well, that's fine.
Agree.
Okay.
I've
stopped playing until those updates come through. I'm waiting.
I'm waiting for Game of the Year, mate. I'm waiting for like 3 years from now.
Yeah, fair enough. Move on. Anyway,
Kinatu definitely became the only hope for them. But the problem is, Arya, right? Like Arya with this Prowler's Core, just lethality, just doesn't care. And we haven't even talked about the man that had the highest KDA in this game yet. Utapon. The golden spatula comes to, you have the effect, you are on fire. Like, it kind of felt like that for Utapon in this game.
It kind of all gets set up. So this is the third Ezreal game in a row. First game,
we've got our narrative started at this point.
Second one, your soul gets to pop off in it. This one, DFM basic go, 4-man stack in the river bush here.
No. Before that, Initialize, what were you yelling for going into this game?
Was it Ezreal bans, perchance?
He was banned.
Ezreal's banned. Just banned Ezreal, yeah.
Even I can't remember the cast because obviously I was watching it with lectures and stuff on in the background, and just like, well, no, rather the game on in the back. Yeah, I have my priorities straight. I'm just remember it's like, hang on, wait, Ezreal's been pretty important these last 2 games. What are they going to do about the third game? Apparently not ban Ezreal.
So it's Bluetooth read again, basically. That's the third game in a row where it's Bluetooth read with like Alistar or Gragas, basically. And they all stack up in the mid lane river bush. Ebby hops over the wall, starting body slam first on Gragas, and they just wait for the cooldown. They wait for the cooldown, they fall, and then the 4 men go, oh no, we're going to go for a late invade and recap to the bush going, aha, I will back away and leave a ward. But around the corner, having body slammed over the wall already, is Ebby with the body slam available. And you just watch recap stutter on screen, and it's like, shit. And it just ends up with first blood over to Ezreal as a result. And it's like, it's all over from there. Utapon gets to go back and get a tier before minions have even spawned. And it's done. It's a pre-15-minute Muramana, or Manamune rather.
Yeah, the super early tier was just unreal in this game, and you felt it. It was felt in this bot lane all game, and that was kind of the depressing thing, because Solan's Secret just never could do anything. Utapon was able to get so accelerated through his build far further than he should have been, because he was able to get an Essence Reaver, because he was farming far more effectively than he was meant to be in the early game, which meant he got a really early Manamune, as you've said, and he was able to get his Dusk Blade in a point of the game because he just had gold to spare. Like, it wasn't like he was itemizing effectively. He was just like, I guess I get my mythic because I have the gold.
Like, giving a single kill to an Ezreal is not really the death sentence it was in, well, I mean, parts of last season, right? Or particularly when double tier was the thing and also other stuff, right? Because the problem with the current tier items is that you don't often buy them first anymore. You have to buy them second, particularly for Ezreal after Essence Reaver. And by that point, you've probably completed your tier even on like a regular time scale. Well, no, if you're slightly ahead of the curve, you've probably completed it before you have the money to actually upgrade the tier. The thing about in this game is that the amount of gold he gets is so ungodly absurd that he manages to get it with that gold very early, because you get the early tier and then you get the early item completion on top of that anyway. That's when you get this double down of, oh crap, we've given them this time-dependent item, even though there's systems in place meant to gate it from being this powerful.
Yeah, and then, like, beyond that, like, nobody buys QSS this game versus Skarnet, Thresh, Lissandra. Like, because they get... because they get so far ahead. And it basically means whoever walks up dies. Like, Hachimacha had an awful time this game trying to get onto anybody, because every time he walked forward, he would just die. And they tried to pick off Arya a couple times, and they get him once. But every other time, basically, he gets to at least get off a supreme display of talent on multiple people before he dies. Or, like, the first... and... that's kind of horrifying as well, to say, okay, so we tried to pick off Arya, but that's not before he's burnt the whole combo anyway, and he's bought time, and then everyone else gets to pile in and ruin our day, and, like, Jinx never gets a chance to fire.
Yeah, and a big part of also how this game just went so far in DFM's favor, especially in the early parts of the game where they got like a 2k gold lead and they were really pushing the pedal to the metal. In the early game, like 2k by 10 minutes, that's not a huge lead. But the fact is, the people that were dying were the ones they wanted to die. Ebby and Kazu were always dying in the early game. And that is so important because the amount of time that Arya, Utapon, and Steel just got to Steel farmed both jungles so much at this game. Like, it's unreal the amount he was farming everywhere. Arya was eating Steel's jungle because it was safe to do that, and also their lane. And Utapon was free firing. Now at the end of the scoreboard, it's like, oh, Sol had more CS. Yeah, because he had like 2 super minion waves always feeding in. If you can't catch up, then you're never going to catch up. It's a catch up mechanic built into this game, and Utapon didn't care.
He's still down 5,000 gold, so good luck with that. Yeah.
And this was just a masterclass performance on why Ezreal still needs to be thought about in professional play. And the LJL definitely finds weird spots in the meta where certain things are just it's not a custom in other parts of the world, but we see these small things.
Yeah.
I'm definitely starting to think that Ezreal, we've started to see play internationally. He never really drops out of the meta. Really.
No, I mean, he's been hanging around to this extent and being this high priority. That's a different story. I think the other regions have still had a lot more, a lot more. Kai'Sa's a big one. I think that Kai'Sa's falling off because the thing about Kai'Sa is that she just doesn't front to back as well as the other primary AD carries right now, unless you have a pretty absurd lead, which you can do. You are an early to mid game AD carry if you're coordinated and you get kills into the Kai'Sa. Yeah, that's fine, right? You just start diving in. But if you're playing against stuff like a Jinx or the Ezreal, you get out DPS if you're hitting tanks. Kai'Sa doesn't like to step up to that. There's a really fun Kraken Slayer build coming in from Ezreal, by the way. If you start losing against tanks, you can actually build Kraken Slayer as your mythic, because the mythic is actually not that important for Ezreal. Occasionally you just sat there after you've got your Dustblade and your Mana Moon. I was like, Yeah, all right. Get some tank killing capability. It's a little bit different, but yeah. Anyway, the whole thing is Kai'Sa just doesn't kill tanks, and apparently the Ezreal is fitting into enough of the poke compositions whilst also giving you the late game assurance that you can have a solo carry in this AD carry position. That is worth picking
Wait,
up early.
you know what else could also become a thing?
New
Because he
trifles?
doesn't care so much about the attack speed as much. Trinity Force changes on
Yeah,
11.7.
Yeah,
this
that's
patch.
fair.
I mean,
It's back
that
again.
I'm not sure that's going to be MSI patch. Sadly, I'm not sure. I think 11.6 is MSI patch.
Oh,
I thought it
so
was
it's
11,
either
I thought it was
6
gonna be
or 8
11.
because people don't quite
Okay.
know.
Well,
what's
okay.
going
Well,
on.
if it does come
We'll
through
find
for
out.
11. Well, so obviously the big thing is. Well, I mean, we can talk
I
about
don't know,
patch changes
lads.
and other stuff, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, obviously the big thing is that a lot. I mean, it still has a lot of excess value in terms of like the ramping move speed, which Ezreal doesn't care so much about. But yeah, no,
No, but the
giving
ability
haste
haste is nice,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually a nice halfway point because Dustblade is okay for Ezreal, but it has a lot
It
of
also
lethality, which doesn't affect his WE and R, which he'd love to have.
and the new passive it also has another fold, which obviously you can get at having stacks on towers, which is just
yeah.
it's another nice thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's always a chance. It means it replaces the Essence Reaver, which is a little bit sad because then it doesn't give you the same mana sustain. But we might see it. We'll see. We'll have to see come 11.7. There's always a chance. Ezreal just abuses items.
Yeah, and like to finish up this one as well.
Yeah,
just
I want to
like,
actually come back to you. Yeah.
just like obviously we kind of mentioned Utapon gets the early fed and kind of gets to go on with it. I think he puts up like this is basically what I love about this just on the narrative point of view. It's basically it's Ezreal game 1, Utapon has a good game, going on great game. Next game, Sol one-ups him, gets an even better KDA, cannot be hitting team fights. And then Utapon comes here and just puts it all on the table. Flop go with these massive nuts, and he's just like, yep, 1307, over 1k damage a minute. I get this early first blood, and it's just done from there. Like, just that whole idea at this point, the fact that it bleeds over to the point where the next game, Rascal just go, screw it, we have to pick Red Sox by Blue Side winning every game, just so we can make sure we get Ezreal before DFM can. It's kind of nuts.
What was the sickest part of it is they also are just like, yeah, Hecarim's fine to give now, and it's just like, so before we actually go on to game number 4, even though I've spoiled it with the Hecarim, I don't think anyone's surprised if I say Hecarim in the LJL. That's 100%. Anyway, I've already said that stat. Gentlemen, or specifically Initialize, because you were with me in the booth at the time, even though it wasn't a physical booth. It's better. It feels nice to call it that. It brings me hope that one day we will actually get to do shit in person one day.
Someday.
It's so weird that our whole careers have been literally in our bedrooms and dorm rooms and stuff. It's anyway. Game 3 felt different to us between game 1 and 2. And it's kind of something I've still not been able to properly contextualize with my words. It just had this feeling that even with Rascal Jester finding one good spot, I never really thought that they were going to win this game. It felt like it was always DFM.
There was one point where Ari, because the point where I was like kind of more zoned into the
and
game.
then Alex comes in. Sorry,
because I know that, but like there was the one point where like Ari was like stood around Tribrush looking for a flank, and I'm like, oh my god, he's caught up with the Ergon. He gets it anyway. I'm just like.
Yeah, I think he finally dies, but not before getting off a supreme display of talent, because basically he's going for the flank and gets pulled off by Urgot, so he goes over the bush and finds Recamp, who was flanking the flank. And like it's like, okay, so I've face checked Lissandra, at which point he goes, crap.
Oops.
And he still makes off a supreme display of talent, and like they still get the dragon in a fight afterwards. Like it's like, well, that's kind of sucky, isn't it?
And I think that's actually a really good point, right, that you've mentioned, Alex, is like every time, even if it looked pretty bad for the side of DFM, it was never terrible. And that's a pretty important thing, because even when a team fight went their way, or maybe they were able to find something, it was never enough where you're like, well, they're going to win now, right? It's like, no, they killed Gragas and Alistair.
Like, if you get the first kill and you get a fear beyond death, flash fear into the team and Soul starts popping off, yeah, they can win fights, but it's just like, DFM just toyed with them in the fights more often than not, really. They were just so far ahead.
Plus, I think it was one of those games where, like, Rascal Jesters, when Soul is behind, just look less threatening. And Kinatu, honestly, had a good game for the first half of it, and then eventually hits this point, it's like, I'm just not far enough ahead of the curve to tank up both this Kiana and this Ezreal. And yes, it's a double AD comp, right? You know, it's Ezreal plus Kiana. And you are into a Skarner who will eventually get really tanky, right? You're into an Urgot who eventually will just get to build something like a Gorgos, and I know he's gone damage because he felt like he probably needed to because people were, but I honestly think third item probably ought to have gone a tank item, not a Black Cleaver.
He went for the Frostfire
you know,
as the main item, right?
He went Frostfire, he went Titanic, Frostfire, and then Black Cleaver third.
Yeah.
And I understand it's because actually I'm the one person doing damage right now. I need to be the threat. But at the same time, I think you go tank third and maybe you can set up to allow Sol to get something in a fight because he just melted. And like that was more my problem. Is like if it turned up in a regular fight, like certain people were so far ahead of the curve that yes, Ebby on this Gragas is behind. Yes, he's been ganked a few times, which is like perma CC from Skarner and Urgot into just Fear Beyond Death. Like you just don't get to survive. But like he still gets to flash body slam, still gets to cack. He's still bringing all the utility he needed to, and he's not even like he's the only tank. There's still a Nudir, there's still an Alistair. Whereas on the other side, you're looking at a Lysandra that's never got to go forward to look for an ultimate. You're looking at a Jinx that's been just miles behind the Ezreal, like it's done.
And this was kind of how this game went. And actually, game number four, weirdly enough, even though because of how it went in the gold in this department, this was the most comfortable, most oh dear Rascal Jester of kind of, it felt like they rolled over a little bit and kind of just played dead because it was easier to play dead than maybe reveal anything else. Now, this is obviously, I'm going a little bit into speculation territory. Now, we've already speculated that obviously they wanted to try and get this Ezreal, but gentlemen, you can't give an LJL team at the moment Hecarim because clearly every jungler has been spamming this to absolute ad nauseum. Like, it's just been ridiculous. Also, yes, Arya played Akali to my dismay. This man in Assassins.
So good.
It was very good.
Yeah. So this is 11.5 Akali, so I don't think it's the changed Akali actually, because that came in 11.6.
I will double check those patch notes for you.
Regardless of which one it was, looked pretty okay. I don't know about you guys, but I think really the turning point for me, and this is one of the reasons why dives just don't happen bot very often, is if you throw a big fight with like quadruple teleports bot lane, that's game over. Like you use your globals, you lose. Particularly if you were in the losing like priority side of things and you've lost a wave to tower top side because you've teleported away from it. I mean, hey, Arya didn't even need to teleport to the example which you're going to throw in. Because he did the old shuriken flip, follow a Majiggy thingy. DFM win a fight bot side, and then that's like to me. That after that point, the game plan for Rascal Jester just flies out the window. It's like, well, we just throw in every single lane. Good luck.
So change to Akali didn't come into 11.6.
Right, so it's old Akali still. I mean, whatever. It's Akali's Akali. I mean, it's probably slightly stronger at 11.6, I suppose, in terms of the fights, but. Peanuts.
I mean that bot lane play was just the sickest thing in the world. Like it was so sick.
It genuinely was. So at this point, like I suppose setting up for this is like like Steel's in the tri-brush and Hatchet has come in to try and get some ward down. So he's over by Steel. So this is Steel's in the tri-brush down bot lane to clarify. And Hatchet is behind him at the red buff bush trying to get some wards down, and he starts recalling. Steel then goes in for the play, which means that Hatchet is a little late because he's a bit further away. And then the teleports get channeled. And everybody comes down, and Arya does that old school trick on Akali of basically just throwing the shuriken flip, waiting for the teleport to come through, and then following. And you get the express, stowaway ticket down to bot lane. And he just flies along, and at this point you're like, okay, so he doesn't have to burn his teleport to get down there. And because Hatchimetra is late, it's effectively a 5v4 early on, and DFM get out with 3 kills to none? Like bot lane's done. Sol survives on 5 HP. Lucky not to go down to that final auto from Utapon. And it's like, okay, so this Kai'Sa in this dive comp is ahead. Bot lane's a complete mess. Kinatu lost like his entire wave to tower. As a result, Ebby just gets to be way ahead in that top lane as well. Arya still got his teleport up because of the fact he got to fall down with the shuriken flip. It's like, you lost the play despite burning your teleport, and you kind of didn't have the best wave positions in your solo lanes. It was just done from there.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy that this game was kind of decided in such a decisive play so early on, but then this is what allowed this decisiveness. It allowed DFM to well and truly snowball this game, as you put it. Like this This was a masterclass from DFM showing, hey, if you give us a slight early lead, we will balloon it into something huge. Now, if that gold is shared between all of us, you saw what we could do game number 1 when we had Ebby on this Gragas, where we did this play and we were able to kill Rika. We did it again, but this time instead of getting 1 kill, we got several kills. We got to apply pressure. We got your carries out of their lane. Like, so many things happened. By the 12-minute mark, DFM had the largest lead they had at 12 minutes, which was 3.4k. And normally that's enough to kind of decisively say, when you've casted enough games as I have in competitive play, probably game. And it's
unless
DFM.
there's like significant team fight difficulties in the late game.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's that yeah, like if you've got Seraphine, stuff like Jinx against a comp which doesn't really have the dive to get to her. In this game, you're just kind of sat there and I'm like, well, there's a Hecarim, so good luck.
Yep.
And that's why Hecarim's so
Kai'Sa.
strong. Hecarim, Kai'Sa, I mean, there's so much dive from DFM. And, like, I suppose the thing for me is, like, kind of, I know tangenting off that, and Sam, I guess you'll return to that, but I'm sorry, but, like, I actually wonder when DFM are actually going to come up against a team that they can't win against with an early lead, because actually they just win with early leads so much.
Come here, I'll tell you, mate. Mid-season invitational.
That'll be it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the deal, right? Like, this is a game where the Ezreal doesn't get ahead for the first time this series. This is after they early rotation, they throw the teleports to make sure that bot lane doesn't go wrong. And instead, you've got a composition which has Hecarim, Akali, Alistar, Kai'Sa, and a Gragas. Like, how on earth does the Ezreal stay safe from that? Like, Hecarim presses R, and then Arya, Utapon, and Ebby go alley-oop and jump in straight afterwards, and the Ezreal just does not get to play the game anymore. Like, it's just that you never get to play safe in the backline. You could arcane shift all you want; they will be able to follow you.
Oh, and he did. Oh, and he absolutely did. He arcane shifted his absolute socks off. And this was a game where he just couldn't do anything. The reason he went heal over cleanse is because, well, there was nothing to cleanse. Like, what can you cleanse?
You can't cleanse
the
death.
Hecarim. Oh, like, what do you care at this point? Everyone's gonna knock you around. CC
There's
control.
There's a slow on Akali Q and on Ebby's Q as well.
And it's not even just that. This is the first time we saw a play around mid lane, right? Like, this is the first time we saw consistently just turn up the mid.
15 minutes, they
actually,
steamrolled this.
I actually
Recap
reckon
could not stay in lane.
I actually reckon this should have been an exhaust game from Sol. Seeing it a lot more on AD carries. Exhaust on AD carries just seems to be very strong right now.
Actually, I think I have an idea.
I mean, particularly when
you still want
Kai'Sa's
Ignite
jumping
on
in.
Secret?
Yeah, exhaust Ignite's fine. Actually, you're not going to get much happening in this early game. Like in terms of the 2v2.
Personally, rather switch the Ignite for Soul and the Exhaust for Secret, just because the extra slight chance of getting a kill. What do you think about that?
But then there's a chance that Secret is left alone in a 1v1 against the Kai'Sa, and that's the big functionality of it. Because Kai'Sa wants to go into a AD carry 1v1, you have that exhaust. We see it a lot between Tristana lanes as well, because Tristana versus X is often exhaust on both AD carries, at least trying to go tit for tat for that. Anyway, we might see that adaptation coming out internationally or in the next couple of patches, or it could just fall away completely again for reasons unbeknownst to me. Who knows?
The meta works in mysterious ways. Gentlemen, the series was 3-1 DFM, as we've already discussed. We've talked about how this game very much started to go further and further into the side of detonation. Focus me. We've covered all of the important points that we've wanted to mention. And gentlemen, with DFM now in our finals, the quick question before we do obviously have our podcast in a few, for next week, which will be our semi-finals and finals podcast episode. I'm going to get your very, very quick take here. Can anybody push DFM to 5 games? I'm not saying win. I'm just asking, can they actually make them play 5 games of League of Legends?
Depends how good teams are on blue side, because blue side seems strong right now. Some teams just flounder on red side. DFM, at least they've got the Arya factor and the Ebby factor.
And the Utapon factor.
Yeah, I think it can go to 5 games just because blue side's strong. But it's like, I'm going to say no. Actually, I'm going to say no, just because I think DFM just have player diff right now. They're just better in across their entire teams. But the logic would be if it does go to 5 games, probably because of blue side. And that leads to draft egregious mistakes from DFM.
Sam, what about you?
I think it will take either Rascal Jesters coming away from that series and picking up some things that they can punish DFM on and having something spicy to bring into this a potential rematch. Something like that, right? Or again, finding another way to get Sol ahead of the curve, right? All of those things would be great. So maybe like, okay, it's how DFM awarding, we can play around that. Like, if you can do that, there is talent on Rascal Jesters. You saw what Sol could do with the lead. You know what this team can do with some crazy picks in draft. Yes, the got Lissandra Jinx didn't work out, but at least the willing is there. Maybe that. My other call might be a team we'll be talking about a little bit later. Namely, if Sengoku continue on their upward trend, then they get somewhere. I said this after the series, and I'll say it again here. I don't think teams in the LJL at their current form can do it. If they can continue to improve, then I can see a world where with a certain trajectory, these teams could reach the point where they can do it. But there is improvements to be made to get to that point.
All right, so Alex is on the opinion that blue side will be the only way that realistically a team can probably push DFM to a full 5 games. I actually think there's a lot of value there. Initialize, you're of the opinion that either if Sengoku can continue that upward trend or if maybe Rascal Jester can solve some of their issues and problems, that potentially there's an opportunity and a chance they could do it. I'm just actually going to be outright and say no. I don't think anybody can beat DFM, and the idea that we have more than 4 games is preposterous to me. We would need to see something drastically change.
2 DFM errors in a series.
Oh, this is the era of DFM, and this might be the year of DFM with how the trajectory is currently going. I think Recap was exposed hugely in this series. There is a huge mid difference, and the fact that he just doesn't seem to know how to play against assassins, and Aria is literally like, that's like my back pocket fun stuff, and the fact that it smashes you, mate, it's a bad thing for Rascal Jester. They're like, Recap, you haven't been exposed once this whole split so far. Till really it came out.
There was like one weird Oriana game versus Axis where his early game was good and then he missed a lot of shockwaves late game. But like Recap's been solid.
I'm not gonna say why that was though.
Yeah, I mean Recap's been solid. So to see him not do so well in this series, I mean, of course it's against Aria, right? But this is the guy that started the split by solo killing him. So yeah.
So it's definitely going to give us food for thought. At the moment, though, you're going to all have to wait and see, because we've still got another week for us to contextualize our thoughts around DFM and Rascal Jester. We've got some time before we actually have to think about them. But gentlemen, 2 teams we don't have any more time to think about. We must start really compiling our thoughts and getting ready for the series, as it is going to be Sengoku Gaming facing off against V3 Esports now, when these 2 teams have previously fought. The first game that was all the way back in week number 1 or 2. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I think it's week 1. Well, this was a very even game. I think a good point where the game was all decided was around an ace that happened in the mid lane. This was a really important TP from Ace coming into the back line. This was where you have Mujin just throwing out nidalee spears and kind of playing the front line at the mid turret. It was outer turrets, so we're really far into this game. It was about 20 minutes in. The fact is, Kolkog just comes out of top brush and then just goes body slam, ult. Ace then lands a double with his gate into the queue, and then Mujin just gets a double kill because he pounces Tiger Star and then just eats everybody. And from that position, it was just a snowball. And V3 play very good. They are still one of the better teams when they get a slight, like when they actually defiantly get a lead, they close. Like, I don't think I've actually seen V3 lose a game when they're at above 3k gold. From what I remember when I was looking at this, they haven't.
So this was a game where I walked away from it really impressed by Mujin, because of course this was against Renex and Talia.
Yeah.
And he kind of protected Kolkog about as well as you can do just by pathing. It wasn't even like, because he had Midley. So that was really good. And then the other thing for me was that Sengoku Ramune just wasn't impactful on the Lucian. So those are the 2 takeaways I remember from that match. Sam, I can't remember if you think of anything else from that one.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think this was an issue earlier in the split for Sengoku, and I think that game probably was the quintessential one. That for the longest time, Sengoku didn't really know what they wanted to do with Ramune. Like, he wasn't really doing a lot on the map. He was sometimes a weakness because he wasn't getting played around and he felt a little bit adrift.
Agreed.
That has improved throughout the season in my mind. And yes, they're still playing to their side lanes, and that is absolutely fine. Ramune still doesn't have the highest kill participation, but his damage numbers are going up. He's still finding things in the lane. They can play around him now. He's roaming better. But earlier on in the season, that was a problem. I think that did show up in that initial game versus V3.
Game number 2 was a complete opposite side of the coin. This was during Super Week, and this was definitely a very hype and important match that ended actually kind of being a little bit of a snooze fest. Nothing happened for the first 15 minutes. I remember this game, and it was
the Camille one?
Yes.
Yeah, this was so boring to watch for the first 15 minutes because literally we got 2 kills on the side of Sengoku. It's like, okay, Rift Herald gets killed. It's like, okay, something's gonna happen.
Okay.
You guys take over from here, and they're not doing anything now.
And behold, a very dull game for a very long time.
Yes, 38 minutes this game was.
And this was kind of at the point as well.
I can't tell if
I
Alex
remember
actually yawned for the sake of the
Oh, I had
podcast
a
or
late
yawned
night.
because he's
I
tired.
had a best of 5 yesterday, go to 5 games. It was a long day.
That's the one. I mean, like, this is one of those ones as well where this is the point where we are like, Cog, can anybody match this guy? He's been playing so many champions, looking so good in the top lane. Goes 0-5-0 this game because Paz and Crash really play around. Like, just seem to have a read on how V3 are warding. Like, they literally time out Cog's deep board and then hop over the wall and punish him. And for that point, Cog just spends his life like getting slapped in the face a lot. And it's like, okay. It's also first time we saw Sengoku not winning through bot lane. This was the big turning point where they didn't have to play through Gango and Enti. They went Senna, Tom, Kench bot lane, and Gango just threw ultimates top and made Paz look good. Like, that was a big shift too, and V3 just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, no, and for me, this was showing that Sengoku did have more than one style, and that was a big thing. That was when we kind of were like, oh, maybe Sengoku are a bit more than flash in the pan. Maybe they're actually contenders now. Well, if they continue on this, maybe we'll see them become contenders, and we have seen them become that since then. And I think the thing for me is that as soon as they realize, hang on, wait, we can actually start using Camille to hit turrets for the rest of the game. No one's really going to stop them now. Cog is this far behind. Sengoku were like, well, why do we need to do anything else then? Can't we just wait for Camille to win the game? And they took the high win percentage chance, and they were just like, we don't need to coin flip anything. Let's just win through top. And it was boring, and it was hard to cast. But it sat there and was like, well, it's still almost like a confirmed win at that point. So Sengoku, I mean, congrats for them to identifying their win conditions, and they did cleanly play it out from the eyes of that kind of lens. Maybe would have liked to see them force a little harder around objectives and make sure V3 were kind of pulled across the map a bit more. Yeah, harshly though.
I mean, this was also the game, remember that V3 Esports stole the Baron, which made this game go on for even longer than it needed to. But, I mean, in all fairness, they allowed it to be stolen away, as well as that dragon, because Hollow just got to kill it while on the background. It was like, oh god! I remember watching that, and I just went, "All right, I'll be back in 5 minutes because I need to wait for this buff to be over." It was just a weird game, But Sengoku played controlled and closed out. Gentlemen, let's just go on to game number. Oh god, no! It's the worst one of all of them. How did this happen? Sam, we casted this one. This game 3. If you're wondering why we're going, wait, teams only played 2 games in the regular. No, because Sengoku and V3 had the same standings at the end of the split, and they had the exact same score, and they were 1-1. So everything was set up for tiebreakers. We were actually set up. Was it 3 tiebreakers, guys, that we could have had going into?
Pretty much.
It would have been max 2 at the same time, but we could have had any of 3. Yeah,
there's a few permutations of it. And like,
yeah. Go for it. Yeah, go for it. Because Sam, we casted this.
This game was an interesting one. Like, again, V3 running. Rather, there was some interest. It was interesting in terms of unusual strategies. In terms of the gameplay itself, it was a little dull. We had 1 kill in 30 minutes. Not the most exciting. But basically, V3 drafted Tristana top for Cog, who ran over the lane and got loads of turrets and basically hit a point where it's like, okay, we're running a 1-3-1 with would have been Tristana top. I can't quite remember what the middle lane was. It Renekton mid? No,
it was Renekton mid.
It was Renekton mid. It was Renekton mid. Yep. And then they kind of had this like core of a poke Varus with a Tahm Kench in the mid lane with the junglers to try and hold that off and be safe and just clear from mid and just turn up with the Varus where you need to. with the Abyssal Voyage, that is. And so they're shoving down the side lanes. It's all looking pretty good. They've got a good gold lead. This Tristana's at 3 items super early. She breathes at the tower and it falls apart. It's like, this is great. We can do this. Problem is, they've got loads of poke, but they have very, very limited engage. Like, effectively, they've got Chains of Corruption from Varus and a Tongue Lash from Tahm Kench. And that is it. Like, there is no other way to hold people in place. And they continually try to Abyssal Voyage in side lanes, and they get a flash, but they can't really get much more because there's no CC. And it's like, okay, well, we're shoving down mid. Problem is, it's hit 30 minutes. And we've got most of the outer towers, and we've got a gold lead, but it's 30 minutes in, and we're against, like, a big team fight comp who can hard force on mid if we need to. And they do exactly that. And Tahm Kench leaves to put a ward down for the first time in, like, 10 minutes. And Hollow dies on Varus. They get a Baron. And then comes the, literally... They ace and then kill Hollow again. They ace and then kill Hollow again and run through all 3 towers in mid lane, get the inhibitor, get all next turrets, and it's over in the space of 2 minutes. Like, it's literally Baron to death.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're against an Azir Xayah, like, that can just happen at any moment. The game can change on a dime.
Yes. Yeah. I think I'd again echo what Sam's sentiments about. Yeah, the lack of engage really hurt V3 in this game.
Yeah.
I think because they were basically trying to lane Kingdom into winter objectives, right? But they're doing that on the wrong side of the map. You don't do that with a Triss top. Yeah, I guess you Herald, but it's not like it's going to get you Dragons. Dragons is the easiest way to win through lane priority. Unless you're going to start unlocking your support and roam around, but Tahm Kench is not a great roaming support. You can't even do that either. Which again leads back to, okay, right, what are we going to do with getting turret plates and start getting Dragons and stuff like that? Well, the answer is that they're not. Because Tahm Kench Varus, yes, it pokes people out, but it's not going to get a lot of the priority you need to start really farming dragons. I mean, I'm trying to remember if they did end up getting 3 dragons, but it just stalled out too much because Sengoku just ended up contesting a couple. And unless you're going to get an early soul and you get a good soul, I think that this composition runs into its inherent pitfalls, and it lo and behold it did, and then it gets to hyper late game. Well, not hyper late game. It gets to late game, and one pick leads into Baron death.
And that was literally the most saddest part of this. I mean, I remember casting this and I was a little bit surprised at the Varus because at the time when it was picked, obviously now I'd be like, well, Ezreal would be pretty sick in this spot. But Senna was open. Hollow could have played Senna. They decided not to. They went for this Tahm Kench. They went for the Varus, and I know Hollow is known as a Varus player. I understand all of the things, and I know there's a VCS player who is absolutely popping off at the moment. He's got he's 6-0, I think, on the champion at the moment. He's like absolutely pioneering this. I'm not impressed with Varus in the LJL though.
Yeah, I mean, like,
LJL
part of it as well is like I think, what was it? It was Varus Nidalee, wasn't it? Was the combo plus a Tristana plus Renekton and Tahm Kench to kind of be front line. Yeah, so the point being, I said, yeah, exactly. I wonder whether Senna might have been the right pick here, but the point also being, actually, with this, you've effectively got double poke plus a Tristana for this. The point is, like, actually, if you ever get to take that gold lead, get Baron, and then siege, there is nothing you can do against that composition.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like, and that was the point. They were looking for engagement. I think actually they should probably be looking for Baron, maybe, and then they could try and turn around from there.
I actually think you're right. I don't actually recall. I might be completely wrong, but you guys can correct me. I don't recall B3 really trying to bait around Baron and have Ace play frontline with Reina.
Yeah,
I don't
you let them come into you, and then you let them come into you, and you have a very different game.
And this is the problem that you have with not having a dedicated tank. You can't tank Baron.
Yeah, I mean, like,
and against an Azir and a Xayah, you are asking to get shuffled into feathers, and that loses you the game. This is, and again, I think another big thing is that if you go for the Senna, you can go for the Senna Tahm Kench. And yes, Senna is less valuable right now because of the Rageblade changes, which again changes how she scales. It doesn't mean that Senna's bad, but she's just not. I mean, Rageblade Senna is just not as good, effectively. What it allows you to do, get more farm into Tahm Kench, and if you get more farm into Tahm Kench, it's more experience. If you get level 11 Tahm Kench early, your roams become that much more deadly because the range increase from your first rank of ult to second rank is actually fucking huge. And at that point, those side lane roams become that much more potent. You don't get that with the Varus. So I think that I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's kind of a minor thing. You still have the Varus ult, right? There are things that you can play around that. As we have a very funny freeze frame of Lexi. I'll refer.
I'm very happy.
Yeah,
very happy.
I mean, like that's the deal, right? Like, it makes like,
there we go.
V3's comp kind of makes sense. Like, it's a 1-3-1 split push. Tristana gets super ahead. If you ever get Baron, you get to basically siege with poke, and that you understand how it works.
Absolutely.
Problem is, you're into a team that got to scale for 30 minutes, and then Azir and Xayah turn up with all their engage and then 3 items to blow up whoever stuck in mid lane.
You're also 1-3-1. You're also 1-3-1 versus heavy engage, and Azir punts Azir and the person they've devoured back into the team. So anyway, it's risky. So whatever. That's about it for that game.
I remember, like, I want to end on around here now because I think it's fair that we just give our predictions, because I think we're kind of hinting towards where our bias team might be. I remember when we last spoke about this, and I said V3 Esports got to a 3k gold lead at around the 15-17 minute mark. This was when they had the advantage to win the game. This is when they should have been playing around more. They should have been pushing more objectives. The fact that we go from the 3k gold lead at 15 to 17 minutes, that we can argue that, to the fact that it takes them another 5-6 minutes, 7-8 minutes to even get a turret as the next objective is demonstrable. Like, this is not acceptable from a team of this caliber, and they kind of have themselves to blame for getting into this spot, because if you're going to draft this, you need to be able to execute this, and you can't expect to get, like, when you are a split comp and you need to be pushing, you can't have a 3k gold lead at 15 minutes in and not win a game like this, because this is one of the games where I look at it and go, you guys are really good at winning from a lead. Except when you play like this, because holy crap, V3, this is bad. Like, this is really bad to the point where it comes to my prediction, 3-1 Sengoku. This is just free real estate. And I'm convinced that Sengoku will into games similar to DFM. That's why it's not 3-0, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Because I would side with I assume, my co-hosts and who are going to go 3-0.
Sengoku favored. I think I couldn't go to 3-2. Yeah, it's 3-0 or 3-0. I haven't made my mind up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing about that tiebreaker is, like, the comp that they picked is going to get you early leads because of the laning phase. It's going to stall out at inner turrets at the very least. Like, stalling out, like, you need to get dragons or baron, and they failed to do that. They didn't use their globals effectively, and they lacked the engage to take fights in an objectiveless map state. And V3 just kind of showed they didn't. It was a hard comp to pull off, and V3 couldn't pull it off.
Yeah, and like, to add on to that, like, I'm looking at their last best of 5 series, and I'm like, okay, Sengoku slapped CGA, bot diff mostly. And then the other side,
diff, really.
And it was like, and obviously the other thing is, like, Sengoku as well, like, chose CGA, which obviously suggested there was more to the Hawks than we were anticipating, and possibly also they thought they had a favorable matchup, namely Gango and NT got to have their way with Milan and Alchemy. That said, V3 struggled against the Hawks. They were down quite a lot in that series. They were slightly lucky, honestly, to get to the win in that series, because they nearly threw at Baron in game 3, and that would have been lights out, frankly. And the fact that it went to 5 games, the fact that it was so close against a team that barely squeaked into playoffs, is not encouraging.
Agreed. So, gentlemen, it comes to this point where I must force you both for your predictions. I've already spoiled my one in my prediction of, okay, so Samuel is joining me, but I want him to say it verbally. There we go. Thank you, sir. And Nymaera, where are you going? Are you siding with us on the idea that Sengoku will int, or are you going to believe they're actually going to do it clean like they did last time?
I think it... Again, I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, so V3 are going to get... Well, if they don't win their first... Well, that's the thing, actually. If they don't win their first game side choice, they lose 3-0. It's 3-0, actually.
Okay.
I think they lose game. I think actually it's game 2 they pick blue side and they lose anyway. I think it's 3-0.
And now for me to talk about Hecarim, because we've brought him up countless times, gentlemen, and I wanted to end kind of this whole section of talking about it before we go into our listener questions at the end of the podcast, to just kind of highlight the champion that we've not really talked about too much. Like, this is a champion we kind of go, oh yeah, Hecarim's good. Oh yeah, but in the league during playoffs, Hecarim seems to be one of the most defining champions in the league. And before coming in, I would have gone, he's high priority. Like, I expect to see Hecarim. Yeah. I wasn't expecting him to be 100% present along with Nah. I definitely wasn't expecting him to have an 100% win rate, which is higher than Nah's, which is 75. Like, and they're both playing a lot of games. Like, this isn't like 3 games and that they're playing. Nah has played 8. Hecarim has played 6 during playoffs. Like, these are 2 very defining champions. And what are your thoughts on this?
Hecarim's real strong. For enough, I mean, partly,
you're right.
I mean, partly, but I mean, effectively, Chemtank is just dumb on this champion. He gets to be more of a frontline. He's still bringing damage because Hecarim turns speed into raw DPS, and so Chemtank means he actually still does
his
damage.
E still
and he's
bursts
harder
out
to
a
deal
target.
with. Yeah, and like you can run phase switch, you can still run Conqueror on this one because you've got enough speed at this point. You can just stay in the backline longer. You're harder to blow up, even if you are taking anti-dive champs. Like Syndra presses R and like takes a third of his HP max. Xayah might root you briefly with feathers, but you're not actually going to kill him that easily. And because there are so many champions to back up Hecarim going in at the minute in the meta, he can be joined by Rel, the other horseman of the apocalypse, by Alistair, by Camille, or just being assisted by the Zillion or the Orianna, which is why DFM were banning them when Rascal Jesters got the Hecarim on their own terms. Like, there are so many ways to not only pick Hecarim, but join him or make him more powerful. It's difficult right now. He's just really, really, really strong.
I actually really love what also Hecarim offers teams at the moment. The fact that across the 6 games that we have seen him win, may I add, he has a CSD of -15 at 15. He has a goal difference at 15 of -214. He has an experience difference at 15 of -354. Hecarim as a champion is more than happy to fall slightly behind to better the rest of his team, right? He doesn't need the early game farm that so many other junglers need and require as I disappear into the void because I said Hecarim's name and he took me into the mist with him. Like, he's pissed, lads. But like, this champion is just destroying the LJL at the moment.
So, I think that, so Hecarim has a slower early clip and stuff like Udyr, and I guess that's the big one, but then you've got a couple other champions which farm quicker than the Hecarim, whose first clear at least is not as potent. But yeah, I mean, Hecarim's more than happy to wait until item, then go towards a dragon fight. He's less about, he does end up having this kind of innate pressure of if you gank a lane and Hecarim's nearby, he always turns up with Ghost. If he's within Ghost into E range, then things are really difficult because you're sat there with Zero, like, oh, I'm gonna go for a flat slap, and it's like, oh, Hecarim is suddenly
you have 10 seconds. Yeah.
And I think the Hecarim's engage range, his backline accessibility is unparalleled from the jungle, and that's really important.
Frontline means nothing to Hecarim.
Exactly, he goes past the front line in a way that no other jungler can.
I mean, and the other thing is, like, actually compared to a lot of other farming junglers, like particularly say the Udyr, I think, and to an extent something like Olaf, your level 6 just means more. Like it just means more. Like Ragnarok's decent. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a good ability, honestly, because you can suddenly ignore CC and stuff. But Onslaught of Shadows is just such a massive ultimate. So yes, maybe you don't farm quite as quick as an Udyr, but hit that second dragon fight. You're level 6. If you've got an Orianna who can throw a shockwave, or a Rel who can join you with a magnet storm, and just the wombo combos you can pull off, really hard to deal with right now. And you know your backline's never safe.
Interesting fact I just saw. Nah's only 2 losses come against 2 Hecarim teams.
Makes sense.
Which is interesting. And Nah has never actually been played alongside. Oh no, he's been played once with the Hecarim and obviously won. Obviously. But his Nah fell very far behind because
I mean,
I don't know.
If we're going to talk about Nah, I think the reason Nah has got a higher win rate is that, like, effectively none of the top laners are good at playing Nah counters in LJL. Like, I
think that's fair though. Yeah.
Rayfark is not
have an Aurelia top laner?
He wasn't playing Jace. Jace is more than fine into Nah. But basically, Afterman tried to play it.
Tried it.
No one plays Aurelia. Unless you're Dasher, and he's in mid lane now. He's not in top lane. No one plays. Well, Camille is okay, but then actually, I actually don't think the Camille's play for the lane. No one plays for the 1v1 lane matchup in top lane. Not really. It's more about using it as like, oh, we'll get an advantage from lane, then we'll go team fight with it. So I think that's one of the reasons why Nara's been so good. I mean, only Kanatu has actually been there, like, having the confidence to go into even Ebby's Nara and just say, yeah, I'll play into that. Sure, cool. I mean, Nara is abusable. And Nara is abusable. If you blind pick Nara, you deserve to get slapped with a counter.
Which is at least promising to see that from Kinati,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think that's really big. And again, when we're talking about various podcast episodes, like, you know, if you would import a VCS player into the LJL, who would you go for? I would go for Yoshino, because he goes for split pushes. He plays, you know, he plays stuff like Fiora and will pop off on it. And I think that the LJL kind of needs that wake-up check to be like, yeah, you picked this, it has counters. In fact, it has so many, you can't ban them out. But
not that I don't think Nymaera is necessarily like people are playing Nymaera and playing it well, and you can still survive.
Exactly.
In bad
No, there are good
matchups.
Nymaera players. There aren't good Nymaera counter players, so his value just shoots up.
I like that.
And like, you know, anybody who was following, say, the LCK playoffs, you know, Canna's had a couple great games on Nymaera, despite there being good counter players for that. Like, you can definitely play it, and the fact you can play it strong side and weak side, you know, there's a lot to Nymaera that makes him good. The problem is that, like, as we said, the value shoots up even more if you can pick Nymaera and feel like you're unlikely to get punished.
I mean, that's just it. Nymaera is definitely dominating. I think the point that Nymaera made around the Nymaera is really. I actually think it sums up a lot of the LJL at the moment and where the metagame is going. It's why we're seeing Hecarim have such a high presence rate. I mean, some of the top champions that in the metagame at the moment, it's like, well, Hecarim, Udyr, Orianna, Thresh, Tristana has a huge impact at the moment, mostly getting banned out, but I mean, that's another one. Orianna's got 9 bans across this playoff so far. Like,
Ori's just very strong against low range champions. Shockwave is actually, but Shockwave in the CC and damage just turns around team fights against low range champions.
And Camille has got 8 bans. She's tied for the second most banned champion, tied alongside Tristana, and only Orianna has 1 more ban. Like the fact is, the big counter that people want to try and play isn't getting allowed, and only Kanatu apparently was allowed it once. So I mean, and guess what? It went well.
I think that some people are going to start picking fighter-ish top lane. If you start playing, I mean, heck, by the way, Darius is genuinely quite good right now. Shame Rayfark isn't in playoffs. I think if you pick someone who's like fighter or fighter adjacent, and then you pick a Nocturne as well, Nah has a really hard time. But the LJL, and we've seen a couple of Nocturne. Well, we saw Nap try and play on CJ. It didn't really work out. But anyway, like I said, there are answers to Nah. It's just not really something that the LJL's good at right now.
I'd agree. Now, gentlemen, I think that's enough talk of Sengoku V3 Esports, our thoughts around Hecarim and Nah, and obviously just the metagame is where it is. We don't do meta talk anymore because it was just us rambling half the time around the metagame. So, but gentlemen, we have talked about DFM versus Rascal Jester. We've given all our thoughts and our expectations around that. Obviously, and our thoughts around that, and now our expectations moving forward for these teams. Obviously, we're going to have our next episode of the podcast where we're going to go heavy in depth of whomever will be facing Rascal Jester, and then giving our thoughts on the 2 competitors and their chances against DFM. As you might have already heard if you've been paying attention, we don't rate them against DFM at the moment. Sengoku Gaming versus V3 Esports, we've already said where we assume this is going to go. Obviously, our live coverage will be happening on Sunday at 9 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen out there, I have frozen. That is why my sentence is still continuing to keep going on and on and on. I am back, and with this, it's time for our listener questions. Gentlemen, we have a few questions. Ishiki has been a jammy devil and asked us a triple barrel of questions, but we're going to go through some of these. Some of these I'm not going to go particularly in depth in because I think this first question is a complete topic for a few weeks from now.
Yeah.
The question is, does the LJL stand a chance at MSI? Now, need to put a little bit of context. The groups have now been revealed of whom the LJL will be facing against, and it's not looking good, is it, Sam?
No. In first seed, we have the LCK. In second, it's the LCS. Third, I believe, is it LLA? I think
LLA,
it is, yeah. And that leaves us LJL at that last seed there. That looks like, as far as mid laners go, you're looking at probably someone like Showmaker or Chovy or Faker or even BDD. And then for the LCS, probably Jensen or Perks.
That's like
Let's
competitor winners at this point now.
Yeah, like that's a lot of world finalists and world championship mid laners who are going to be in that one. And then on top of that, LLA would be Boogie, interestingly, most likely, for them. So, like, it would be
I'm
that
so
might be a
excited.
bit of a fun match.
No.
The point being that I suppose if potentially Team Liquid go, there's like a minute chance. I think we could maybe take some games there, but I think third is what you're looking at there.
Oh,
for
Ebi
LJL.
versus Alfari would be really fun.
Would be really
actually.
fun. Be really
So, okay,
fun.
so answering the question short and sweet, does the LJL stand a chance at MSI? If it's DFM or Rascal Jest, it doesn't matter. No, we don't stand a chance, but I'm adding the caveat of it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter
should be
because
competitive.
actually the
Doesn't matter what
experience
you
you
think.
get, the experience you get from being in a group like that, getting to play against LCK, that's huge. When was I mean, it's been a while. I can't remember the last time the LJL has ever played against a Korean first seed. Never, right?
No, never.
So
It's been a while.
this is huge. Actually, I look at if DFM
I'm
gets to
guessing
go there.
All-Stars might be the closest thing we could
Yeah,
probably argue. Right?
the LJL beat the
Doesn't mean
LPL in
that.
All Star, right? When they
yeah.
had that like the mishmash roster, but no one, yeah, it's All Star, it's whatever, right? But still, this is huge, and this is huge for DFM if they do get their roster together and then get experience onto Aria, or if Rest will just do the same thing. Of course, very important to them. I mean, well, I'd assume it's gonna be one of those two teams. Anyway, the eventual Rascal Jester representative, no, the eventual LGL rep is gonna get a lot of good experience. They're not getting out of groups, absolutely no way, but it's good experience.
I think it's all fair to say, similar to what we've been harping on about before, and to sound like a broken record here, we just want Aria to get experience here because the guy's never played international.
Nope.
He gets this, he gets the scared, he gets the jitters of being a rookie, gets that off, goes to Worlds, fucking smacks everybody, like destroys them, shows that he is the best mid laner in the LJL, and not only showing he's the best, that he is filling the void of Syros. Really big narrative points, and it should be so easy for oh god, it could be so cool. It's going to be so cool. Next question that comes, and we've already hinted towards it: will Boogie's rain hell upon the LJL? He is talking obviously about there's a good chance that at the moment the #1 seed, and by the way, I've been trying to vaguely watch. I've not been watching LCK because I've been trying to keep up with Boogie in the LLA, so forgive me, but it actually kind of works off here. Furious Gaming, the team he's been a part of, this whole split over in the LLA, has been absolutely dominant. They've been tied at the top of the standings for most of this, and will Boogie rain hell upon the LJL? There's a chance.
I think it's between I think it's actually quite a tight competition. I mean,
It is. All Night Infinity and Furious could all take it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that LJL, LLA, they're probably trading third and fourth.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I think it'll also be an interesting one to see some of those jungle matchups because some of those guys look real good. Cloud9 might be bringing Blabber, of all people, who, has historically been quite good. Canyon, that why you might have remembered from Worlds, who ran over pretty much every jungler he dared to look at funny. Steel's going to be coming along as well. That's some potent competition in most roles. I mean, that's the joy of MSI, though, right? It's not like it's necessarily Worlds where you can end up with some quite imbalanced groups. This is just the best teams from each region coming across. We'll have a conversation about MSI another time, of course, and there's conversations to be had about, well, what happens if one region is just way stronger than everyone else in the world, so their third seed equals a first seed. That's when Worlds gets a little bit more interesting, right? But you do get these groups where it's sort of like Cloud9 in one group, and then also and then also down one. And then there's just poor old DFM or Rascal Jester, let's have fun.
Well, actually, let's go on to that, right? What if Rascal Jester qualify for MSI? Is Ishiki's last question, and I mean, DFM are going to have at least the experience opportunity, but Rascal Jester, I feel like it would be another V3 scenario.
I actually think that if Rascal Jester qualify, it's really bad for the LJL because, again, I do genuinely think the only team that has the upper ceiling to make a dent at a Worlds run is DFM. And they need that experience in RS so he doesn't choke at Worlds. Because if Rascal Jester qualify now and then lose to the empowered roster of Gang joining DFM in summer,
which it will be,
then you've basically just denied the experience from DFM at MSI. And of course, they want to qualify, and if they end up qualifying both splits, good for them. I just think that the upper ceiling of DFM, for me, is more important to the region, which is why I'm kind of there kind of on DFM.
Kinatu would get eaten alive.
No, but then you might. But then again, that might be.
Yeah.
It might be very important for Kanatu, right? If he goes and plays
Yeah.
against Alfari and I don't know, I mean Kana
Khan.
or Khan. Yeah, no, some of the greatest 1v1. One of the greatest 1v1 top laners of all time.
And I'm gonna say Junri. That's on Furious Gaming. Fucking insane. This guy is actually smurfing at the moment.
No, and that actually might end up doing. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, and actually Kanatu comes back with a wealth of top lane experience and ups the top lane pool in the LJL. And it's
Wait,
not
there's
just so
finally
centralized.
3 top laners that are really, really good, not just Rayfaki and Ebby.
Yeah.
Hey!
No, and there's a chance, right? Yeah. So I think what happened. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, does it matter for the LJL getting out of groups? No. Neither of these teams are getting out of groups in a steered group like that, unless Team Liquid completely.
Well, we need to see what happens to the LCS. We need to see how their playoffs go.
Yeah, or Liquid or Cloud9 completely capitulate. I just don't think that's going to happen, though. No. I just don't see it.
But with that all said, ladies and gentlemen, we are being very careful with what we say because one, we want to see everyone and all the teams that are going. We're going to be covering MSI to the same extent, at least minimum, of what we did last year, which was giving our thoughts, being honest with everybody. Obviously, we didn't get to do quite what we would have liked to have done because MSI sadly didn't get to happen last year. But obviously, we put out as much and we gave as much as our thoughts around everything, and we're trying to be as realistic as possible. But that will be coming in a few weeks when we actually have all that information. PP God, the Pope of PP God, obviously, not PP God himself. He is, though the Pope has come and blessed the LJL for their hopes at MSI, so we've got that hope going for us. Everyone talks and knows about MVPs and great players, which the LJL has got several of those. But who are the worst players in the LJL in our opinion? Now, this is going to be a fun one to do. Obviously, verifying this is our own views and opinions. This podcast, it does not represent the LJLOU, and and PP God even in their question said, in your opinion. So very subjective. I'm only going to say, guys, let's say one player each. And let's try and not have any overlap, so at least it's broadening out, because we don't want to be
short
targeting.
List, I think. I mean, and again, this is like, remember that a player performing badly is not just themselves.
How they will always play.
It's about the framework they're in. It's the meta. It's their experience. It's
leads a team game.
It's not being on stage. It's being online as well. I mean, I can think of about 3 players I could probably shortlist for the people that have struggled the most. So, I'm probably safe.
Also,
if you guys pick
our definition of worst player is going to be different between all
so
three
if you guys want to go first,
so.
I think I'm safe if you guys pick 2 different. I'll just pick the third out of my list if you do cover the first 2.
I've got a few as well.
I'm going to go for the first one, and you guys I'll probably have an idea where I'm going with it. It's a certain member on Burning Core and Yuhi. He is actually the worst player in the league. I don't care that he is arguably maybe better long-term than a lot of other bot lane carries. He has also offered and done a lot more in the LJL, so is it fair to do that? But what he is preventing, and the reason, I honestly, and I don't care how wrong I might be, and people can defend Yuhi to the cows come home, he is the reason that Burning Core did not make playoffs in my eyes.
He would have been potentially one of my choices as well. I would go with Tussle personally, as much as it pains me to say.
Okay. I think that's really fair considering his playoffs.
Yeah, like this is a guy who was being out DPS'd by supports at points. Like he was sub 200 DPS. And horrific.
Corporal's sick though, so
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and there's also there's an element of this guy's vision score is also poor. I've had issues. So many issues with
that's super weak. Oh god,
with how they're setting up for objectives. When you lose vision,
it's like Nocturne was on the map.
Both sides of the map at once, and a lot of that is off your jungler just not having the stats there. And that's not to say that Tussle can't be great. I know what this guy can do.
Agreed.
And he's still got the mechanics on things like Lyra and stuff. The problem is his play from when things start going bad is not good. He plays from behind exceptionally poorly right now. From ahead, actually pretty good. We saw in players what the Hawks could do. And Tussle, when he was ahead, was doing good things on the likes of Olaf. It's not like this guy doesn't have his upsides, but when it's even or behind, he's worse than invisible. He feels like he's a legitimate, glaring weakness in terms of what he's doing on the map, because he's not doing DPS and he's not helping out with the vision score, and he's certainly not farming well.
No. Nymaera, your
Okay.
play.
Those two are two of the players which I would have put up. So I'm gonna go to my third one, which I said. I guess outside of those two, it's kind of sad. I think I have to give it to Milan. Actually, oh my god! As I mentioned that name, Lexi is eaten by the green screen. Christ almighty, that's
He's fine on my end.
Okay, well, it's I'm certainly refreshing that.
You're the one recording though. That's the problem.
That's one of my boys.
Exactly. No, I think that basically, I was thinking, oh, could I make an argument for Hoglet on his worst games? But I'm like, if I have to do that, I have to say Milan on his worst games
as well.
Milan's worst games have legitimately been solo losing CGA games. And part of it's 2v2, part of it is playing around an AD carry, but sometimes like you're just playing lane dominant stuff and getting your shit kicked in. Positioning was poor in the early weeks. Yeah, had 1 or 2 good games, but it's only 1 or 2 good games. There's not really much to caveat that. I mean, the bright sides are it's a player which has had some playmaking examples. Sometimes it's also flying into a Nara role as a Kaiser, literally ulting into Mega Nara. I'm like, cool, buddy. Cool, but he's still got time to learn. So again, this is more like a good news. I'm leaving the door open to Milan coming back and be stronger. But for now, not.
That's why he's your third, right?
That's why he's in the third. Yeah, I would have. You picked the first. I'm like, all right, I guess I go Milan just to round it out.
We got the easy one. You said I'm happy for you guys to go first. I'm like,
no, mate, I said it right.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that there are obviously players on some of the other teams. We didn't mention just a single player on Axis. Obviously, it's like we could have mentioned Hoglet, but like it's not fair because Axis also just were kind of a bunch of rookie players. Like, is it really fair to shit on somebody? And like the redeeming players of the parts of Axis were Honey and Hoglet, and their good games far outweigh their bad games in my eyes. I mean, Burning Call, we've already covered a member. And then we've literally covered a member from the bottom 3 teams. And then after that, it's like, well, I'm not going to say V3 are playing bad. We just talked about how they have opportunities to beat Sengoku. We don't think that's going to happen, but we could see a world where that happens. There are players still like Reiner and Mujin on this team that have definitely been doing things for it. Kogkog, obviously. And I don't think there's ever a reason. No. Players will play bad, and we already speculated, and well, not speculated, but actually gave reasons why a player could have a disappointing split for a wide variety of reasons. These players aren't bad, ladies and gentlemen. They've just had a bad split. Yeah. And if we had to give an MVP for worst player, for me, a player that is the worst player is someone that is detracting and taking resources away. And I think these 3 players do brilliant examples of this.
Yeah, and like again, to clarify. That is not to say that is all these players will ever be. And
absolutely.
Players don't have room to go better. And you're like, Tussle has been arguably the best jungler in the league. Not even that long ago. Like there is a world where he gets returned to that form, and there are so many reasons that explain why things are going on. Yeah, his playoffs, the games where they won, Tussle was good. The games where they lost, he was really not. But that just sounds like a bit of a feast or famine player, and they've been a lot more famine than feast this split. Like. There is, and Milan is a rookie on a team where Alchemy's not the strongest laning support either. Like, there is lots of things going on here.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily make that all of this is on them. It's not saying that's all they will ever be. It's not to say these players will always be, inverted commas, bad. They're just players we think we've struggled this split particularly.
Absolutely. And with that, gentlemen, we have actually reached the end of our podcast. I believe we're hitting in at 1 hour 30-ish, so I'm very happy with the time frame.
10 minutes into it. It's all right.
Now I'm a little bit sad. All right, well, I thought I kept to the hour 30. Hey-ho, little bit over, but we've covered a huge amount. We've covered DFM versus Rascal Jester, Sengoku Gaming versus V3 Esports, all of our thoughts around giving our predictions for that series, and then the questions. Gentlemen, after this episode, our next episode will be revving us up for finals, our semi-finals, and obviously it's time to drop this. Things are going to be different for our finals. If you're only going to be able to cover any of our coverage of the LJL, I highly recommend tuning into our finals, as we will be trying to up the production value to a level we have not yet seen at the LJL. So big things are coming here over at the LJL OU. We are trying our absolute best to give you the best product that we can give. And if anyone out there is interested in maybe hooking us up with like an org or maybe something else, like we're open. We're available to talk. DMs are open. But with that said, from myself, MaskedSwan, Initia1ise and I think I throw it even further this way. Nymaera. You are unequaled and enchanting, as I've already mentioned at the very beginning. That has been episode 11, and we'll be back very soon on Sunday at 9 a.m. Join us there.